Imagine for a second that you are handed the keys to a multi-million-dollar startup. You're given a highly specialized, incredibly diverse team to manage, and you're told to produce absolute world-class, groundbreaking innovations.
Oh, and you have to do all of it without, like, a single day of leadership training.
Right. Not one day. It sounds like a guaranteed recipe for a meltdown. But the reality is, if you're listening to this and you work in academia, you know that is the exact situation for most principal investigators running academic research labs today.
Yeah, it's a staggering contradiction in how we build scientific infrastructure, honestly. We expect PIs to be world-class researchers, secure these massive competitive grants, publish constantly, and manage a team ranging from brand new undergrads to highly seasoned postdoctoral fellows.
All at the same time.
Right? And we expect them to do all this people management purely by instinct, like without any formal blueprint at all.
Well, that sets up the mission of our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We are unpacking a really fascinating set of materials on lab leadership and the reality of managing academic scholars.
Right. Yeah, because there is this piece of data from McKinsey in our sources that totally reframes the entire conversation.
The talent management data.
Exactly. It shows that talent management is actually the single most powerful driver of laboratory productivity and success. It yields the highest return on investment of almost any operational effort in a lab.
Which is wild.
I know. And yet, when surveyed, it is the exact area that PIs cite as most in need of improvement.
So, meaning the biggest bottleneck to scientific discovery right now might not be funding or technology. It might just be basic human management.
Precisely. That's why today we are extracting the evidence-based strategies for managing scholars. We're laying out the roadmap for transforming a lab from a chaotic, highly stressful environment into this high-efficiency engine.
Yeah.
We'll explore the dual psychology of leadership, how to formalize expectations without killing collaboration, some highly surprising data on who actually drives a PhD student's success, and the digital systems required to keep the whole operation from collapsing under its own weight.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because looking at the sources, to fix lab management, we have to start at the top of the food chain. There's this fundamental identity crisis going on.
Oh, absolutely.
The PI is essentially trying to do two completely different and often conflicting jobs at the exact same time.
Right. The materials draw a very hard, vital distinction here. As a lab leader, you are simultaneously a supervisor and a mentor. And confusing those two roles, or, blending them together, is where the vast majority of lab conflict originates.
Okay, so supervisor versus mentor.
Right. Supervision is inherently hierarchical. It's vertical. When you are supervising, you are leaning on a formalized employer-employee dynamic. Your focus is directing the work, ensuring compliance with institutional rules, managing strict timelines, and making sure the lab actually delivers on the milestones promised in the grant.
Because at the end of the day, the lab operates like a business that has investors, the funding agencies, and it needs to deliver a return on that investment.
Exactly. But then you have to switch gears entirely to be a mentor. Mentorship is a horizontal partnership. It flips the dynamic from telling to asking.
Okay.
When you wear the mentor hat, your focus isn't the grant. It's the scholar's long-term professional and psychosocial growth. You're guiding them through career anxieties, helping them build independent critical thinking skills, and developing them as a future colleague.
I mean, I see the logic there, but let's look at the reality on the ground. Is it actually possible for one human being to embody both of those roles for the same person?
It's extremely difficult.
It's like asking someone to be the loan officer demanding repayment and the therapist helping you cope with the stress of the debt at the same time. If I'm a PhD student terrified you're going to fire me for ruining an expensive essay and missing a deadline, I am absolutely not going to open up to you about my imposter syndrome or my doubts about staying in academia.
No, of course not.
It just feels like an impossible tightrope walk.
It is a tightrope. And the sources argue that the only way to walk it without falling is through an adaptive leadership style. You just cannot use a one-size-fits-all approach.
So it changes based on the person.
Right. Your ratio of supervisor to mentor has to adapt based on where the scholar is in their specific journey. Take a first-year PhD student, for example. They are essentially in an apprentice stage.
Okay.
They need a highly structured developmental approach. Early on, you're heavily wearing the supervisor hat, providing detailed direction, establishing protocols, closely monitoring their progress.
But then as they gain competence,
Yes, you must consciously pull back and transfer ownership of the scientific problem to them.
you're slowly turning down the volume on the supervisor and turning up the volume on the mentor as they earn that autonomy.
Exactly. And you contrast that with a postdoctoral scholar. A postdoc is no longer an apprentice. They already have their Ph.D. They are much closer to being your peer.
Right, they've already done the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you try to heavily supervise a postdoc, like micromanaging their daily bench work, you're going to breed massive resentment. The relationship with a postdoc must be a collaborative, consultative partnership from day one. You're there to help them refine their vision and transition into running their own independent labs.
That brings up an interesting tension, though. If we know the relationship needs to adapt so drastically based on the scholar's level, how do you establish those ground rules early on? Because if you're listening to this and you've ever managed anyone, you know that walking into a room on day one and handing an employee a massive dictatorial rulebook is a great way to kill any collaborative spirit.
Oh, completely. But the alternative is relying on unspoken assumptions, which the materials highlight as the absolute breeding ground for resentment.
Yeah.
If you don't explicitly establish the rules of engagement, human beings will naturally invent their own, and they rarely align.
That's so true.
The solution recommended by institutions like UC Riverside is formalizing expectations from day one using a two-part framework. First, you have a broad job description, the scientific scope, the overall goals.
Okay.
But the real linchpin of the management strategy is the second part, which is a highly specific letter of expectations, or LOE.
I love the concept of the LOE. I look at it like a research prenup.
Research prenup, that's a perfect way to conceptualize it.
Yeah, it's a mentorship agreement where you lay all your cards on the table before the stakes get too high.
Right. The LOE doesn't just cover science, it covers the mechanics of working together. It details matters of attendance, routine reporting, data management protocols, and specifically how and when communication should happen.
But wait, if you're trying to foster a horizontal mentorship dynamic, drafting this prenup still sounds a bit like a one-way HR mandate.
Yeah.
How does a PI introduce this without it feeling like a hostage negotiation?
Well, the key is that the LOE requires mutual buy-in to function. The PI drafts the initial document, setting the baseline standards for the lab, but they hand it to the scholar as a draft.
Oh, okay, so it's open for discussion?
Explicitly, you ask them to review it, question it, and provide input. You negotiate it together. This transforms the LOE from an HR edict into a living document and a shared agreement of how you are going to survive working together.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the materials take this expectation setting a step further with the individual development plan, or IDP.
But if you're listening to this and running a lab, you know a piece of paper doesn't magically align a team. There has to be a mechanism that translates those broad career goals into Monday morning tasks.
Right, and that is exactly what the IDP is designed to do. Frameworks like My IDP for the Sciences or Imagine Ph.D. for Non-Sciences start with a rigorous self-assessment by the scholar.
So they evaluate themselves first.
Yes. They map out their actual skills and define their long-term trajectory. Do they want a tenure track academic job? Are they aiming for private industry? Do they want to pivot into science policy?
Okay, so once that trajectory is on paper, how does the PI actually use it?
Once a year, the PI and the scholar sit down and dissect that IDP. If a scholar identifies that they want to transition into biotech, let's say, the PI can start tailoring their daily bench tasks to build industry-relevant skills.
Like what?
Like maybe focusing more on high-throughput screening techniques rather than esoteric theoretical modeling. This is where the talent management investment pays off.
Because it connects their daily work to their actual future.
Yes. It skyrockets the scholar's motivation because they aren't just grinding out data for the PI's next grant. They can draw a direct line between their daily tasks and their future resume.
So we have the psychology of the dual hats, we have the research prenup signed, and we have the career trajectory mapped out. But that creates a massive logistical problem.
Oh yeah, the bottleneck.
Right. If a PI is running a lab of 15 people, relying solely on that PI to execute all this customized day-to-day mentoring is going to create a severe bottleneck. And here's where it gets really interesting. Our sources highlight a mind-blowing study led by David Feldin that completely flips the script on who actually drives a student's success in these environments.
The Feldin study. This is arguably the most crucial piece of data in this entire deep dive.
Break it down for us.
So the research team tracked 336 PhD students in the biological sciences across 53 different universities in the U.S.
That's a solid sample size.
Definitely. And they rigorously measured year-to-year improvements in their core research skills. We are talking about the ability to design an experiment, establish testable hypotheses, and independently analyze data.
And the results just challenge the entire hierarchy of academia, right? Because the identity of the student's primary PI, the person whose name is on the door securing the funding, it didn't predict the student's skill improvement at all.
None at all. There was zero statistical correlation. Having a highly prestigious, heavily published PI did not translate to the PhD student becoming a better scientist year over year.
Which is wild to think about. What actually moved the needle was the postdocs. The data showed that PhD students were 5 times more likely to improve their research skills annually when postdoctoral scholars actively participated in lab discussions.
A 5-fold increase.
Just by having postdocs in the mix.
Yeah. To understand the why behind that explosive statistic, we have to look at the structural reality of modern science. It all comes down to what the sources call elbow-to-elbow proximity.
Right.
PIs, especially successful ones, are simply not at the bench. They're locked in their offices, writing the grants that keep the lights on. They're traveling to international conferences. They're bogged down in university committee meetings.
It reminds me a lot of the medical residency system. The attending physician, the PI, is the ultimate authority on the case. But it's the senior resident who is actually in the trenches at 2 a.m., teaching the first-year intern how to physically place a central line.
That is a highly accurate parallel. The postdocs are the senior residents of the lab. Because they are physically at the bench, they provide what the sources term just-in-time mentoring.
Just-in-time mentoring, I like that.
Right. When a PhD student hits a wall, like an assay fails, a piece of equipment malfunctions, a data set just looks bizarre, the postdoc is 2 feet away. They offer immediate troubleshooting and engage in the daily, granular scientific dialogue that actually builds a researcher's intuition.
Which means as a lab leader, you can't just hope this happens organically because people sit near each other. You have to deliberately empower your postdocs as co-mentors.
It absolutely must be a formalized strategy. And when done correctly, it creates a powerful triple win scenario.
A triple win.
Yeah. The PhD students get immediate, high-quality guidance without waiting a week for a meeting. The postdocs gain the crucial managerial and mentorship experience they will desperately need when they launch their own independent labs. And the PI's administrative and supervisory burden is significantly reduced, which frees them up for high-level strategic thinking.
Okay, but having postdocs act as co-mentors creates a whole new problem. You now have 3 layers of people interacting: PIs, postdocs, and PhDs, maybe even undergrads. How do you stop wires from getting crossed?
Yeah, that's the challenge.
To coordinate that kind of multi-layered ecosystem, you need a bulletproof communication infrastructure. The sources talk about moving from a messy garage to a smart warehouse.
Right.
It's the difference between trying to find a specific wrench in a pile of rusted tools versus walking into an Amazon fulfillment center where every single bolt is barcoded and tracked.
Exactly. You cannot manage a high-functioning team via sticky notes and fragmented email chains. The materials outline the necessity of establishing a high-efficiency communication cadence, specifically built around a 2-tiered meeting structure.
Okay, what's Tier 1?
Tier 1 is the regular one-on-one meeting. This should occur weekly or biweekly, lasting about 30 to 60 minutes. But there is a massive shift in how these are run. The PI does not drive the meeting.
The scholar drives the agenda.
Always. The scholar uses a shared template, filled out before they even walk in the door, outlining their specific goals, their recent progress, and crucially, any roadblocks they are facing.
So they have to think about it beforehand.
Right. This forces the scholar to take ownership of their project. They aren't just showing up to receive orders, they are presenting their scientific narrative and asking for targeted help.
Then you have Tier 2, which is the all-lab strategic meeting. This is for discussing shared goals, big picture resource allocation, maintaining safety standards. But I noticed a very stark warning in the materials regarding these team meetings.
Oh, the warning is absolute. Never communicate exclusively through team meetings, and never, under any circumstances, use a team meeting to address an individual's performance issues.
Yeah, think about your own daily workflow. We've all sat in that room where a manager gives a vague, passive-aggressive warning to the entire group because they don't have the courage to pull the actual underperformer aside.
It creates a highly toxic environment. It destroys morale and inflicts unnecessary anxiety on your highest performers who start wondering if the message was meant for them.
Exactly.
Performance feedback belongs strictly in the private, psychologically safe space of those structured one-on-ones.
So we have the communication cadence locked in. But what about the physical, or rather, digital warehouse? Managing the raw data, the protocols, and the administration of a dozen researchers simultaneously just sounds like an organizational nightmare.
It is the downfall of many labs, honestly, which is why modern talent management relies heavily on centralized digital platforms. The blueprint we're looking at highlights tools like Notion, which, by the way, offers free education accounts, to build a centralized wiki-style workspace.
Right. The guiding philosophy is everything in one place. No more searching through 3 years of Slack messages to find a protocol.
Exactly.
So what is actually being built inside this digital warehouse?
The sources break it down into 4 main pillars. First is a comprehensive resources wiki. This houses the lab handbook, onboarding guidelines, safety protocols, and key institutional links. When a new scholar joins the lab, you don't overwhelm them with 20 fragmented PDFs. You send them one link.
I love that. What's the second pillar?
Centralized data repositories. This is critical for institutional memory. When a senior postdoc finishes their fellowship and leaves, their hard-earned knowledge doesn't just walk out the door on a personal laptop.
Right.
The data is secured, backed up, and immediately accessible to the PI and the next scholar picking up the project.
Okay, and the third pillar is something called Kanban boards, specifically used for tracking publishable pieces. Now, if you're listening, you might know Kanban from software development, moving cards from to do to doing to done. But applying it to academic publishing is really fascinating.
It's so smart because it addresses the massive cognitive load of research. Staring at a whiteboard that just says, write the Nature paper is totally paralyzing.
Oh, absolutely.
Instead, a lab breaks that massive project down into single publishable units, like a specific figure, a single isolated experiment. You track these chunks on the Kanban board, tagging them by active grants or target manuscripts. It makes progress visible to the entire lab in real time.
It kind of gamifies the research process, which is brilliant because science is notoriously slow. You need those small, achievable wins to prevent burnout.
Absolutely.
There's actually a specific example of the materials that illustrates this perfectly. One lab used their Kanban board to run a summer writing challenge.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the goal was simply to clear a certain number of these publishable pieces off the board as a team. To move a card to done, a scholar had to draft the methods, write the results, and produce a polished figure. But instead of doing it in isolation, they used Slack to actively critique each other's drafts.
I love that.
And when they hit the team milestone, they celebrated together.
It's a prime example of taking a dry, highly isolating process like academic writing and turning it into a motivating, collaborative team event. That is effective talent management in action.
And then the fourth pillar is the protocols database, linking operating procedures directly into electronic lab notebooks. I mean, I see how this digital warehouse creates incredible efficiency, but I have to push back here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Can a centralized wiki and a nicely organized Kanban board really prevent a blowout over whose name goes first on a breakthrough paper? Because when we are talking about academia, human ego and career survival are inextricably linked to publication.
Right. You are hitting on the ultimate stress test of this entire system.
Yeah.
Digital tools cannot overwrite human nature. The ultimate test of a lab's management infrastructure is how it handles the biggest minefield in science, which is authorship disputes.
It's the ultimate conflict. Careers basically live or die by authorship order.
They really do. The one-on-one meetings we discuss are designed to catch communication breakdowns early, but authorship is unique because the stakes are permanent. The strategy the sources provide here is that proactive written clarity is your only real shield.
So we're back to the prenup concept.
Entirely. You cannot rely on unspoken local norms. Every researcher has a different internal metric for what constitutes enough work to earn an authorship spot. You have to sit down early in the project and operationalize exactly what a significant contribution means.
But how do you make that objective? It sounds so subjective.
Well, you remove the subjectivity by adopting established international frameworks. Instead of relying on a vague sense of who worked hardest, you use frameworks like the credit taxonomy.
The credit taxonomy.
Right. For anyone unfamiliar, the credit taxonomy breaks down a research publication into 14 distinct roles. Things like conceptualization, data curation, formal analysis, writing the original draft, or developing the software. You map those roles out.
Okay, so there's no debate about who did what, because it's categorized by specific functions rather than just, like, time spent in the lab.
Precisely. You embed these rules, whether it's credit, the ICMJE recommendations, or APA standards, directly into your lab's wiki so everyone understands the criteria from day one.
That's smart.
Furthermore, the guidelines dictate that you must clearly establish in writing who the final arbiter is in the event of a dispute. Usually that is the PI, but the chain of command must be universally understood before the conflict erupts.
Because it depersonalizes the conflict. You aren't fighting over ego, you're just referencing the agreed-upon policy.
Exactly. But the sources are very clear that there is one final non-negotiable piece to this puzzle.
What's that?
All of these systems, the IDPs, the Notion wikis, the co-mentoring frameworks, they entirely collapse if the PI does not practice rigorous self-leadership.
It all flows downstream. What does self-leadership actually require of a PI?
It requires modeling healthy professional habits. A PI cannot lecture their lab about work-life balance and mental health and then send frantic, demanding emails at 2:00 a.m. on a Sunday.
Right.
They have to establish boundaries. They must consult their own mentors when they face administrative or scientific challenges. Most importantly, it requires the discipline to say no to a new grant opportunity or a collaborative project when the lab is already operating at maximum capacity.
That's tough for a lot of overachievers.
It is, but leadership is ultimately a reflective practice. It demands the humility to admit when a management strategy is failing and the agility to try a new approach.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? If we synthesize these materials, the grand takeaway is that managing talent isn't an administrative chore pulling you away from the, real science. Managing talent is the core engine of lab productivity. You have to recognize the tension between the supervisor and mentor hats. You have to kill unspoken assumptions by writing down expectations in a living document.
Yep.
You have to formally empower your postdocs as co-mentors to build that real-time feedback loop. And you have to construct transparent digital systems to keep the information flowing safely.
Looking at all this evidence, it leaves us with a rather profound question about the broader academic ecosystem. If we know definitively that talent management yields the highest return on investment in a laboratory setting, what does it say about our institutions that sheer publication volume and grant writing are still heavily prioritized over formal leadership training?
It really suggests the entire incentive structure might be misaligned.
It does. It forces you to wonder, could the next major scientific breakthrough be unlocked not by inventing a more powerful microscope or securing a larger government grant, but simply by training a better manager? How much incredible world-changing science is currently being lost to toxic lab environments, mismanaged talent, and inefficient communication?
That is a staggering thought to leave on. The idea that a better manager might be the ultimate scientific tool. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, every scholar who graduates and moves on from a lab carries that leadership legacy with them. The culture you build today is the exact culture they will take to their own startups, their own labs, and their own classrooms. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and if you are holding those keys to the startup we talked about at the beginning, you might just want to look at upgrading the locks.